You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is an author, communications trainer, and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share with your friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation. Matt, last week we talked about how to deal with a difficult audience member during a presentation. And after that, it got me to thinking about an article that you published some time ago, which was how to ask difficult questions.
Sure.
Today, I want to pick your brain about that. What do you mean by how to ask difficult questions? What are difficult questions and what kind of situations are you talking about? Because the way I see it, you had talked about it as a huge advantage that one could have. So I want to ask your opinion about that.
Yeah, well, as far as difficult questions goes, I mean, there's the objectively difficult question, but what I mean by objectively is, I mean, without your taking your emotions into account. So an objectively difficult question would be like resolving a logical discrepancy, for example. Like somebody says A, and then they also say B, and A and B are both contradictory, and you ask them to resolve the difference. So that's one example. But the other example of a difficult question, I refer to it as putting your head in the lion's mouth. It's a situation. It's a situation where you're afraid of taking the risk. It's kind of a risky move to ask that question. Maybe the question isn't that difficult actually, but you perceive it as that way. You're afraid of the situation. Like if you are, for example, one time that it often comes up is when somebody is presenting in the C-suite, or maybe they're presenting to the CEO or they're presenting to the board of directors or something like that. So it's a difficult question, partly because, well, one, it is a good question, but the main reason that it's a difficult question is that you're scared and you perceive it as more difficult than it really is. Okay. And so what I have today is some tips on how to deal with a situation like that. And there's 3 tips that I wanted to mention that are they're basically pre-game tips. They're tips for before you enter the conference room or the event or the meeting itself. And then there are 3 tips that I want to mention. They're kind of physical, tactical tips that might help you when you get into the conference room or in front of the audience itself, in front of the board itself in this example. And the first 3, the pregame, these are the mindset things. And these are the 3 mindsets that you need to adopt while you're preparing your presentation. So this is before the event begins. This is before the presentation begins. And the first thing is to remember that these people, in this case, in this example, the board, in this example, these people don't know everything. One of the common misconceptions is that people that are higher up than you in an organization know everything. For some reason, they're like God and they know everything. But the fact is that they don't know everything. And in fact, that's why they've asked you to present. In this example, the board has asked you to present because you're the subject matter expert and they don't know this subject nearly as well as you do. That's why they have asked you to be there. That's why they've asked you to do this presentation. So that's mindset number 1 to have to keep, is that your audience doesn't know everything. They don't know everything. The second mindset to get into or to remember is that these people typically value time way more than they value money. They've probably got a lot of just by being board members, they've probably got a lot of the money aspects of life taken care of. They've got the big house and they've got the fancy car. Maybe they even have a driver. So they've got the money part taken care of. But they don't have the time part taken care of. Nobody has the time part taken care of. Everybody has more to do in life than they have time for. And board members are no different. And so time is especially valuable to these people. So anything that you can do to consolidate your points or to focus your answers or to focus your presentation is going to be appreciated double. Like if you, for example, if they have given you, say, 20 minutes to make your presentation, they will love you greatly if you figure out how to do it in 10. If they have given you 10 minutes to make your presentation, they will love you greatly if you figure out how to do it in 5. The worst thing you can do, if they've given you 10 minutes, the worst thing that you can do is make them sit through 15 minutes. That's the worst thing you can do. Yeah. The third mindset is kind of related to the first one. And that is that these people, in this example, the board, they want to hear your opinion. And what I see a lot is when people are preparing a presentation for the board, they think that they just need to stick to facts, and they think that their opinion is not wanted. And that is also completely false. The board wants to hear your opinion. They might not agree with you, and they might choose to do something else, but they want to hear your opinion anyway. You're the subject matter expert, and they want to hear what a subject matter expert thinks about what they should do. They want your advice. That's why they've asked you to make this presentation. So those are the 3 mindsets. One is that these people don't know everything. The second one is that these people value time more than money. And the third mindset to adopt is that these people, they want to hear your opinion. They are seeking out your opinion. So those are the 3 mindsets that you need to get into before the event starts, before the presentation starts. And so there are 3 things that I wanted to mention about these are physical, tactical things. These are physical, tactical things that you need to do in the room when you are making your presentation. And number one is to keep your eyes lower than the other person's eyes. Keep your eyes lower than the audience member's eyes. And by that, I don't mean, look down at the floor and I don't mean look away from the other person. I don't mean these things. I mean, keep your face or keep your eyebrows lower than the eyebrows of the other person. And this is just a way of coming across as non-threatening. Yeah, it's a way of coming across as deferential and non-threatening. And if you are standing giving your presentation and the board members are sitting in chairs or something, it's going to be completely impossible to keep your eyes lower than the eyes of the audience. So if that's the situation, if you're standing and they're sitting, then you're not going to be able to do this. You'll find some other way to be deferential and non-threatening, maybe in the language that you use or the body language that you adopt or whatever. So that's one thing, is to keep your eyebrows lower than the eyebrows of the other person. And if you're both sitting, here's one way that you can do that, because the first thing that comes to a lot of people's minds is that you need to slouch, and then your posture just looks really bad, if you're slouching in your chair. So here are some other ways that you can do it. One is that you can lean forward with your forearms on your knees or something like that, and that will just kind of naturally lower your head. Another way that you can do it is you can lean forward on the table. So if you don't want to lean on your knees, you can lean forward on the table. And, maybe like, for example, you cross your arms or cross your hands or something like that, or, fold your hands or something like that and lean forward on the table. And that posture will naturally put your eyebrows lower than the other person's. The second thing is to keep your body loose. And this comes into mirror neurons and the tendency of people to act like other people around them. So if you are asking your difficult question and you're all tense and you're adopting a defensive posture, the other person, just because the other person is also human, and this is just how humans tend to act, the other person is going to see your defensiveness and they're going to become defensive too. And so they're going to challenge you. They're going to challenge what you say. And you don't want that. You want a nice, open conversation, a non-defensive conversation. Okay. And the third thing, the third important thing, the third physical, tactical thing, and this is probably the most important tip, is use the other person's words and phrases, not your own. For example, if what you see a logical discrepancy. The other person is saying, let's do A and let's also do B. And you see, okay, well, those A and B, they're contradictory. They can't both be done at the same time. How are you going to resolve this discrepancy? Instead of saying, hey, you're stupid. A and B are mutually contradictory and you can't resolve them. Instead, get the person to say A and then get the person to say B. And then you say something like, hey, wait a minute. I don't understand something. A few minutes ago, you said A, but then you also said B. And those two things seem like they're contradictory. So how do you do both? And just by posing it as a question and by allowing the person to use their own ideas and use words that they've said already, that they've signed up for, you're much less likely to get a defensive response out of this person. This person will spend their time trying to resolve the discrepancy and figure that out rather than attacking you. So those are the three tactical tips that you can put to use when you actually get into the conference room.
Yeah, and the third one is it could be quite a difficult question in itself, like asking other people, especially like the board members or something, to clarify their own contradictions.
Yeah, and the ability...
Would it backfire?
The ability to have the ability to recognize and point out or bring to the fore, because if you use these tips, you're not really pointing out the contradiction. You're just kind of escorting the other person towards the point at which the other person can acknowledge the contradiction. If you can point out or help point out the contradiction between these two things, it won't really backfire. In fact, it'll go the other way typically. And they'll start thinking, wow, this person sees things that we don't see ourselves. We need this person. And that will get you, instead of backfiring and get you hated, it'll get you invited back for more, because these people will want you to start vetting their other ideas too.
That's a good point. Do you think there could be cultural tendencies at play or cultural difficulties, for example, practicing these mindset shifts and the tactical tips that you talked about? For example, I mean, from where I come from in Turkey, I think it would be fairly safe to say the boss is almost all the time right, mm-hmm. or the manager is almost all the time has a stronger opinion or knowledge about the topic. I wonder if it would be as easy to apply this in such cultures as other parts of the world.
It's definitely it's more challenging to apply these in some cultures. Definitely, it's more challenging. But in the example that you mentioned, kind of a boss culture where the boss is always right. That's one of the reasons that the third part of the tactical tips, the A and B, and having the boss use the boss's own words to describe things. That's why it's so important to do that, because if you come out of the box and you point out the contradiction and say, hey, A, you said A and B, but they're contradictory and this isn't going to work, then of course the boss is going to throw you out of the room. And
he's not going to be your boss anymore.
Yeah, he's going to fire you. But if you have the boss think that the boss has identified the contradiction, or A and B, the boss has said A and the boss has said B, and now the boss has to explain how we do A and B together. The boss has ego working for you, basically. The boss is going to try to think, okay, how do I resolve? You don't have to do any of the intellectual heavy lifting. The boss is going to try, just in order to save the boss, in order for the boss to save the boss's own face, the boss is going to try to figure out, how do we resolve this discrepancy? And so we're almost out of time. We're almost out of time, but do you have one more question, or should we wrap it up for today?
No, I think we got pretty much everything covered. I understand that, including especially the mindset change and the technical tips, they could take some time to practice. I don't think it would be realistic to expect immediate results in the first attempt. But you're absolutely right. In the long term, they could prove very beneficial both for us and actually for the company itself.
Yeah, and you're correct. It does take some time. You can't on a Monday say, oh, these people scare me, and then on a Tuesday not be scared of them anymore. You can't do that. You do need some time.
Yeah. Unless you take supplements.
Yeah, and it would take some pretty strong supplements. But master these skills, master this skill, and this skill will take you far in life. If you don't master this skill, there are doors that will never open to you. If you do master this skill, they'll fly open to you in ways that you never even imagined.
All right, I like that. Well, thank you for all the information.
Yeah, so that's it for today, and thank you very much, Alper.
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
All right, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.